It's time for my September reading wrap-up.
I'm just sitting here.
Hello, book people. I wanted to do my September reading wrap-up. I do realize by the time I post this, it's going to be the third week in October, but I had some other videos that I wanted to post before I posted my reading wrap-up, so I'm getting around to it. Anyway, I read quite a few books in all, 10 novels and 4 graphic novels. Of those books, 5 were middle grade, 5 were young adult, and 5 were adult books. Since this is my first filmed reading wrap-up, I thought that I would talk a little bit about how I rate books. And I'm pretty easy when it comes to rating books. I feel like if I enjoyed it and it makes me happy, then I am likely to give it a high rating. It's pretty much as simple as that. And another thing is, when I'm reading a middle grade book, I try to think of it from the perspective of my childhood self. And if it was something that would have pleased me when I was a kid, then I will as well give it a high rating. But here's the breakdown. 1 star, I hated it. 2 stars, I didn't like it. 3 stars, I liked it. 4 stars, I really liked it. And 5 stars, I loved it. So if I give a book 3, 4, or 5 stars, it's a good rating from me. Okay, so I thought what I would do is, since I read middle grade, YA, and adult books, I'm going to break my video down into each section for middle grade, YA, and adult. And I'll put right here the timestamps of each section so that if you're not interested in middle grade, for example, you can skip ahead to young adult or adult books. So the first book I'm going to talk about is called Rocket and Groot, Stranded on Planet Strip Mall by Tom Angleburger. So this is a Guardians of the Galaxy spin-off with the characters Rocket and Groot, and they are flying around in space. They end up getting stranded on a planet that is made up entirely of strip malls. On this planet, there are maniacal robots bent on excellent customer service and also killer toilets. It's told with simple drawings throughout that are really cute and funny, and anyone with kids who are fans of Guardians of the Galaxy would really enjoy it. And ultimately, I gave this 4 stars. The next 2 books I want to talk about are from the 39 Clues series. I have been slowly reading those books this past year, and I finished up the series with books 10 and then book 11, which is the book that leads into the next 39 Clues series. So the 10th book in the series was called Into the Gauntlet by Margaret, Peterson, Haddix. Now, this 39 Clues series is written by multiple authors, and the authors include Rick Riordan, Gordan Korman, Peter Lerangis, Jude Watson, Peter Carmen, Linda Sue Park, and lastly, Margaret, Peterson, Haddix. Since this is book 10 in the series, I don't want to give away any spoilers, so I'll tell you a little bit about the very first book in the 39 Clues series, which is called The Maze of Bones by Rick Riordan. So in that book, we meet brother and sister Dan and Amy Cahill, who just happen to be part of the world's most powerful family. Everyone from Napoleon to Houdini is related to this family. The only problem is that Dan and Amy have no idea that they're part of this family. It's been a big secret. And when their beloved grandmother Grace passes away, they, along with several other members in this large extended family, are invited to come and hear a reading of her will. And suddenly they have an impossible decision to make. They can, in that spot, on that very moment, decide to take away $1 million, no questions asked, and just go. Or they can take a clue that is part of 39 other clues hidden all over the world that leads to the biggest secret of all, the source of the Cahill family's power. Each book is incredibly fast to read. You can read them in a day. I do admit I was a little worried at first that with so many authors, it might get a little bit confusing, or that the voice of the story might change from book to book, but it really stayed the same and I really enjoyed it. And yeah, I gave this book 5 stars. And then the next book in the 39 Clues series, it's technically an in-between book that is kind of serves as a bridge between the first 39 Clues 10-book series and then the next one. It is called the 39 Clues Vespers Rising by Rick Riordan, Peter Lerangis, Gordan Korman, and Jude Watson. I believe in total there are 5 spin-off series to the original 39 Clues books. And this book features the introduction of the Vesper family, which is a rival family to the Cahills. And they have been waiting in the shadows, hoping to gain access to the 39 Clues and the secrets that lie within that. I also gave this book 5 stars. I will probably continue on with this book series. It's just really fun. So the next middle grade book I read was Tunnel of Bones by Victoria Schwab. This is the second book in the Cassidy Blake series. The first book is called City of Ghosts. And so basically Cassidy Blake is a girl who can see ghosts. She's had a brush with death herself, and ever since then she has gained a new best friend whose name is Jacob. In the first book, City of Ghosts, Cassidy heads to Scotland with her parents. Her parents just happen to be a ghost hunting team with a TV show, but they have no idea that their daughter can actually see real ghosts. And then Cassidy meets a girl named Laura who can also see ghosts. And Laura teaches Cassidy that she is what is called an in-betweener, a person who can see ghosts and whose job it is to send them on to the afterlife. Cassidy isn't sure how she feels about that, or in fact what that means for her friend Jacob. And so book 2, Tunnel of Bones, takes place in Paris, in which there is more ghost hunting and more adventure. One thing I really liked about this book is that the places talked about in this and also in the first book are real. You can Google the places. It talks a lot about the Paris catacombs. You should totally Google it because there are pictures there, and it really helps bring the scenery to life in your mind. This is a good one. I really enjoyed the second installment and I gave it 5 stars. And the next book I read was Dead Voices by Katherine Arden. Again, this is a sequel. It is the sequel to Small Spaces, which came out last year. I had a really good reading month, so of course I loved this book as well. From what I've heard, there are going to be 4 books in this series, each one taking place during a different season. This book takes place during the winter. Now, in the first book, Small Spaces, you learn that Ollie, the main character, is suffering from a tragic loss, and one day she goes on a school trip with her friends, and there she meets a mysterious smiling man where a lot of spooky things happen. And after the spooky events of book 2, Ollie and her friends are hoping to kind of relax and unwind and recover from the trauma they experienced, and so they go on a ski trip with Ollie's father and a couple of friends, and things are clearly not as relaxing as they had hoped because, again, creepy, scary things happen. This is a ghost story. They are snowed in. The electricity goes out. Things get scary. This book actually did spook me a little bit. Usually middle grade books don't scare me much, but I gave this book 5 stars. I cannot wait to read the next 2 books in this series. I really, really liked it. Okay, so moving on to young adult books. I read a graphic novel. It is the 3rd book in a series called My Boyfriend is a Monster. You can read all of the books in this series, I believe, individually. At least the 3 that I've read, they are not related to each other, so it doesn't really matter what order you read them in. So the 3rd book in this series is called My Boyfriend Bites, or Once Bitten, Twice Shy, by Dan Jolley, and illustrated by Aletha E. Martinez. So this is an incredibly fast read. It's very short. It's a little over 100 pages, and the main character's name is Vanessa Shingle. Vanessa has a knack for choosing boyfriends who need fixing. It's like her hobby. And so when she meets Jean-Paul, she is thrilled. She thinks he is perfect for her, and she thinks that she can help him so much. And she does not understand why this good-looking hunk of a man would waste his life as a janitor, and she believes that he needs fixing stat. Clearly things are not all as they seem, considering the title of this graphic novel, and Vanessa is in for some pretty big surprises. I will say they are incredibly insta-lovey, so if that's not your thing, you might not enjoy it. But considering the fact that all the boyfriends in these books are monsters, I'm willing to let that go. And I did enjoy the first book in this series more than the second and third book. So overall, I gave it 3 stars, but it was still pretty cute. The next book I read was called Greek Gods, #Squad Goals by Courtney Carbone. This book is so funny. It is basically the Greek god myths told through texts and tweets and memes. It is hilarious. One of my favorite stories in this was with Artemis. There's basically a creeper. He adds watching Artemis bathe out in the open to his interests. And Artemis is like, "Are you serious, mortal?" And he says, "I can't help it. You're so beautiful." She says, "Don't make me throw this magical water on you so you turn into a stag." And then he says, "You're so cute when you're mad." "Don't say I didn't warn you," Artemis says. And the next thing he's updated his profile picture. She turned him into a stag. I was surprised how well some of these stories translated through text. Another one that was really funny was Oedipus, and I just found myself laughing so much through this book, and I gave it 5 stars. After reading Greek Gods #Squad Goals, I picked up Darcy Swipes Left, also by Courtney Carbone. This book, again, is told through texts and memes, and it is the Pride and Prejudice story, and it was also really funny. I did enjoy it. I don't think it translated as well as the Greek myths into using modern technology. Sometimes it just felt awkward when they were in the same room together, literally texting. I mean, I do realize younger people will do that and text each other when they're in the same room sometimes, but just with, you know, the Pride and Prejudice story, it felt awkward. But other times were hilarious. If you think of Mrs. Bennet and Kitty and Lydia, they would shine using modern technology, and so this book was really great, and I gave it 4 stars. And there are other books that Courtney Carbone has in this modern series, and I am definitely planning on checking them out in the future. Okay, so I have a visitor. We have our new dog, Jack Jack. I talked about him a little bit in my disability readathon video, so I'll link that. Here he is here. Jack Jack, say hi. Hi, bud. He has been a bit of a handful, so I'm trying to give our kids a break and see if he'll sit with me for a bit. I actually talked about this book in my fall reading recommendations video, so I'll link that as well and go into more detail in that video. This is a book that I hadn't read since I was a kid, and it is a forgotten gem, and I loved reading it and revisiting the story, and it was a definite 5 stars for me. I forgot that I needed to show it. Here's the cover. This book is fantasy. It's not scary at all if that's what your typical experience is with Stephen King. It has princes and a fight for the crown, and there's murder and an evil magician, and it's just so good. So the next YA book I picked up was Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell, illustrated by Faith Erin Hicks. This is a gem. I know a lot of people are talking about it. I really enjoyed it. It's a graphic novel, and it's so cute. Just look at the end pages here. That'll give you an idea of the illustration style. Let me find some. Here's a. So if you love fall and Halloween and anything to do with fall themed activities, you will love this book. In this book, the 2 main characters are Josie and Deja, and they have worked at the pumpkin patch together every year. And now that they are seniors, this is the last year that they'll be working there before going off to college. So Josie is a melancholy type, and he's really feeling down about this, but Deja has a plan. She says, what if they skip work and spend the night going through the pumpkin patch, taking part in all the activities that they never got to take part in because they were working. And instead seeing all the sights and tasting all the treats and having all the fun that they can in this last shift at the pumpkin patch. This book takes place all in one night, and it was just so cute. This book actually reminds me a little bit of when I was in high school. I was in the band, first chair flute, and we used to have bonfire parties and just had a really great time. And so I have a great fondness for anything pumpkin patch or bonfire nights or anything like that. So yeah, it's pretty much guaranteed that I would give a book like this 5 stars, and I did. Okay, so moving into the adult books that I read this month. I read Carrie by Stephen King. I've talked about this again in my fall reading recommendation video, so be sure to go and check that out. And in this book, you basically get to see her say enough is enough and fight back against all the people who ever did her wrong. It's told with first-person interviews and magazine articles woven throughout, which really adds interest to the narrative. And I gave this book 4 stars. The next book I read was Hyacinth Bouquet's Hectic Social Calendar. This is a Keeping Up Appearances book. I'm a huge fan of 90s British comedy, and Keeping Up Appearances is one of my very favorite. And when I realized that there were a couple books out there that had Hyacinth Bouquet, you know, that involved her, I grabbed them. This is literally her agenda. It is her social schedule, and you see it's a handwritten calendar, and basically you see her notes about her days and her plans for her candlelight dinners, and it was just really funny. And it's something that I really enjoyed, and I gave it 5 stars. And then I read The Color of Magic by Terry Pratchett. I'm a big Terry Pratchett fan. I have not read all the books in his Discworld series, but I have recently decided that I would like to. So I am going to start rereading the ones that I've previously read, as well as hopefully all the new ones. And The Color of Magic is the first book in his Discworld series. In The Color of Magic, the 2 main characters are Rincewind, who is kind of like a failed magician, and then Two Flower, who is the first tourist that the city of Ankh-Morpork has ever had. And nobody's quite sure what to make of him. He's kind of like a mystery to them, let alone poor Rincewind, who gets pulled in against his will to play protector and guide to Two Flower. This book is really fun. It's a quirky adventure. If you start out knowing that in the Discworld, the world itself is flat and it rides through space on the back of 4 giant elephants, who in turn are riding on the back of a giant turtle who is called the Great Atuan. And yeah, if you know that, it just gives you a sense of the nonsensical fun that you're in for. And I gave it 4 stars. And the last book that I read this month was Good Omens by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman. I've talked about this book before. In my last video, I called it by the wrong name. Even though this is like one of my favorite books of all time, I'm usually operating on very little sleep, so yeah, I got the name wrong. So the 2 main characters in this book are Aziraphale and Crowley. They are an angel and a demon and best friends, despite the fact that they work on opposite sides. Basically, the apocalypse is coming, like by next weekend, and they've gone and lost the Antichrist. It's full of jokes, like almost everything in it is a joke, and I laugh constantly. And yeah, it's fantastic, and so obviously I gave it 5 stars. I would give it 1,000 stars. Okay, that's it from me today. Please tell me down below in the comments how your reading month went in September, and if it was a great month for you or not. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next week. Bye.